Ready, aim, release! Anyone see my mammoth? Right. Hello everyone. Now, you'll notice this week I am alone. Carlo is away on one of his many holidays that he gets to have as the CEO of his own business. Some other bullshit here. No, it's just gonna be me this week, except I'm lying slightly. I say I'm lying slightly. We have Chris literally joining us. Chris from here. Anyone who knows who Chris is, he was here last week. I'll just give you a quick reminder. Last week, he's the professional troll. And this week, he's going to be my second best friend. But his video is currently loading, so I'm waiting for him to load up. Chris, do you want to say hello quickly?
Hello, everyone.
Hey, so it is working.
You thought? Oh, cool. You thought you got rid of me? I didn't. Even less preparation than last week.
Even less preparation than last week, which is what we like, right? We like minimal preparation. That is what we love about this whole thing, to be honest. So I'll stick that in the corner when he loads up. When his video loads up, we'll just get a nice loading. We might have to see. We'll have to see if the whole time it loads, and if it loads the whole evening, that would really be a loading box for the rest of the day.
No, I actually got into a car accident. I am now just two small squares circling each other.
Oh my god!
This is what I look like. Yeah.
Are you the
bad.
AI that's replacing CarloBot? So this week a couple of things. Obviously not much news, right? Not much news at all. In fact, minimal news. Nothing has really happened. It's sad, to be honest. So we're not going to talk about much there, except earlier today, and myself and Chris were talking about this earlier. This Facebook post randomly appeared from Gavin, who is anyone who doesn't know Gavin, he's the guy who runs gaming figures in Redcar. He's got an email directly from Asmodee saying that Car Stark loyalists, Stark Heroes 3, Castle Rock Honor Guard, Lannister Heroes 3, Night's Watch Heroes 3, Free Folk Heroes 3, Gold Cloak Swordsman, Gold Cloak Crossbowmen, and Gold Cloak Elephants, those 9 elements, as we can see right here, are due to be released in January. Chris, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, it's just mental, isn't it? And like my biggest thing is I'm so worried about these elephants. Like, if these elephants are good and you see elephants every game,
yeah,
it's just gonna make me upset. But yeah, like, has anyone like Free Folk Heroes 3? Has anyone ever heard of that coming out before? Night's Watch Heroes 3. Like, I mean, obviously we sort of realised they were going to come out, but I hadn't heard they were on the horizon at all. I've heard about everything else on here, but yeah, I mean, it just seems mad. I mean, we probably won't get any of it in January, right? But yeah, it's still. I mean, we still haven't got Red Cloaks, still haven't got Greyjoys. I mean, it's just mental. Just mental, isn't it?
Absolute madness. Like, I don't understand how anyone in their right mind can believe that this is actually going to hit the board. Like, I mean, this is not stuff we knew, stuff we have known that's coming out, kind of. Like, none of these names are completely new, but it's crazy to think that they're actually thinking that these things are going to get released.
Right? I'll tell you one good thing though, right? Not only does winning the Song of Ice and Fire Always Winter GT in Scotland net you a invitational ticket, but quite possibly now a box of elephants, a box of Night's Watch Heroes, 6 or 7 by January, who knows? Yeah, it's pretty exciting possibilities for the price support for that. But yeah, It's just mental, isn't it? Like, it's
Yeah.
just absolutely mental. And like, I know Bruce was saying in the Patreon chat earlier, like, he still hasn't got Mother of Dragons, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So some
it's
places,
just,
some places in Canada still haven't got Mother Dragons, which really does just add salt to the wounds, to be honest. Um,
I don't get, like, if this is real, right?
yeah,
I don't know why they don't, like, why have they missed out on all the opportunity to do any marketing about this stuff?
yeah,
Like, it's possible that they wouldn't want this stuff to be known before Christmas because they don't want it to be eaten into people's Christmas money, like budgeting and, people buying presents and stuff like that. It's just mental. Like, it's just absolutely confounding, confusing. Makes no sense.
we've talked about it a lot, both me and Carlo, and of course yourself. Um, and I don't want to sound really negative, right? I don't really want to sound like, oh my god, it's terrible, oh, it's terrible, and just constantly say it's terrible. But realistically, I mean, the marketing right now, it's just kind of like, how can we possibly ever really understand what's going on, right?
I I don't even believe it because I'm just on Anytime War Games now, right? Like, in theory, they would have all this stuff up for order
Yeah,
if they were getting it in Jan. Like, I mean, having said that, I will vouch for Gavin as as someone, like a reliable source of information, definitely. So,
but he
I'm not saying he's wrong, but
but he only ever, Gavin. There we go. Gavin only ever looks at what he can get and looks at what's happening, right? And relays that information. The problem is that Gavin's getting this information, and it's clearly, to be honest, Asmodee pulling him down the river a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, Asmodee are lying that this is actually going to get delivered on, because it's simply not,
I
right?
mean, I'd be amazed. Who knows? We might get another Stormcrow incident where we get them dropped in the UK like 4 months early or whatever it was this time last year when the Stormcrows dropped. But um, yeah, like, it's just it seems pretty unlikely, doesn't it, that they'll be here for January?
Yeah, massively so.
Uh,
Massively,
there
massively
we
so.
go.
There's a still image. Don't worry, guys. His camera's not frozen. It's still loading, but at least you get to see his pretty face from last week. So, um, yeah,
I don't look like that anymore. I told you, car crash from 2 floating blocks.
that's true. Shall I load the floating box back up? Give that true image back.
It's giving me trauma. Um, no, that's cool. Yeah, like, it's just madness, isn't it? Like, it's like, I was on a bit of a high because last week when we were talking about, it was last week, wasn't it? We were
Yeah,
talking about the new starter sets and stuff like that, and I was kind of feeling like it actually shows some like maturity and like some long-term hope for them that they're resculpting models. Do you know what I
yes,
mean? Like, it's actually like, okay, no, this is a long-term plan for this game. You just need to hope they get these basics sorted out, man, because this is what's. I mean, obviously, like the balance and stuff, and the fact, but it's like it is the distribution of the faction packs, and it is just distribution in general, which I think is hurting the game more than balance at this point.
I tell you, actually, that was something that I was really sad about, and I don't know if it's just me. Obviously, Tony Ground, I'm clued into what's going on like all the time. I can try and like stay on top of the news as best I can. That's kind of the point. But someone literally posted the other day in one of the main discords, like, I got my faction pack today, and by the way, this was what was in it, as if to like tell people what was in them because we didn't know. Um, I've known what's in these faction packs now for 10 months, right? Pretty much. It's
I've-
mental to me to think that people a year, nearly like it's definitely over half a year since they were meant to be released, people still don't even know what's in them. Like,
yeah, like there's definitely levels to it, isn't there? There's levels of like engagement, and like
definitely.
people like you obviously super engaged with what's going on and kind of follow everything. You're probably one of the most active people on the Discords and the Facebook, and like you really know what's going on like all the time. And even like even I'm probably, if you were to categorize it, in the same sort of level of you, but granularly probably not. But yeah, there are people that just don't know what's going on, and like that isn't a knock. It's just they've got other war games they play, or it's not a big deal to them, or they're not that involved in the game for whatever reason. And yeah, it's just mind blowing. They're called the 2021 faction packs. and it is December 6th in the UK, and they're not available. It's just mad, isn't it? I don't know. I don't want to keep talking about it because I think I just know they can do a better job than this.
Yes.
I know they can. I know they can. I really want to win the lottery because the market cap on them's like 17 million. I was like, I could definitely just buy them and sort it out.
That's the funny thing. That's actually the really funny thing, right? In that I do believe a lot of their problems. Don't get me wrong, some of them are serious issues, and I'm not going to sit here and say I could do a better job than them. Some of the issues that they seem to have, or some of the problems that they reach, I do feel that they compound the issue themselves. You know, we could talk a long time about marketing and what I kind of my background and stuff and what my expertise is. Your expertise in the whole kind of like marketing aspect and business management side, and it just does definitely feel that as not even experts in what we pretend to do, we still have what seems to be a better handle on what their business is. And that's not to knock the people that we see from the likes of Michael and Fabio and the very complex systems that they run with, right? That's not at all a knock to them. But it definitely does feel that what they present to us as purchasers, as buyers, as customers is starting to get impacted by those things. So yeah, it's a big shame.
I will say all my frustrations are born out of passion for the game.
Yeah.
Like I don't think I'm anywhere near as I used to be. Like I think I spoke to Carlo about this a little while ago, but I used to be like almost obsessed with this game. Do you know what I mean? Like before going up to lockdown and into lockdown, and lockdown obviously like because of the great work that you guys did with stats and running that first NRG tournament and all the hard work that Bartender did. Like it was one of the main things in my life over lockdown. Do you know what I mean? And even before lockdown in a way. And it's just like I don't know. It's just hard seeing something you love so much getting a raw deal because the game is still, even in its current state, where I think it's probably the least balanced it's ever been. I still think it's the best war game I've ever played.
I would tend to agree. I mean, literally went from enjoying the game pre-lockdown to running all of this, helping Carlo with stats and everything kind of like in lockdown and all the kind of things that we pushed for constantly, and we're just constantly looking for the next thing to do because it was the best thing. Like for us, it was like the best game we've ever played. So yeah, it was a real shame.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the only reason the LGT happened like last year is because initially we started talking about it so long ago when I was still in like the super loved up phase of it. Do you know what I mean? Like just absolutely loving it. But yeah, you just want to see it. You just want to see it get the distribution and therefore the attention because I do think that if it's in more people's hands, like one of our local stores we were playing at doing like a clearance sale on it. It's just because there's just no. Yeah, it's just tough.
Yeah.
Not quite Carlo.
I thought this week.
I thought this was a revolving door. I thought this was for the best UK Lannister player, and we've only just done the math to catch up and work out that it's actually been me this whole time. Anyway,
that is probably true actually. Although saying that, I think Jacob of Glace currently leading the Sunday Slaughter ELO event, playing Lannisters. So you might have to just take a bit of a backseat, Chris. To be honest, mate.
Does he live in the UK?
He does, yeah.
Oh, God's sake.
Right then. So, the actual main theme of today, I will move on to the main theme of today quite early. I expect today to be quite a short episode. I mean, I say that every time, right? And it is this week to look at terrain. Okay, so a lot of people constantly ask about terrain and always want to know more about terrain and want to know more about this, that, and the other. And I thought it would be a really good idea for us to actually go through terrain and discuss it. So, a couple of things we're going to do. We're going to talk about terrain in a very general sense, I guess, and then obviously talk about how each faction can use it. Chris, obviously you've played a lot of factions now, as have I. The badges, of course, we'll look at badges later on. But a lot of different games about lots of different factions under my belt. we're going to look at terrain, how it can impact gameplay. So, are you ready?
I am, mate. Well, I say ready. I've done no prep because I didn't know until 5 minutes ago I'd be on. But yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. Let's see if I can actually get this right. There we go. Right. So, Weirwoods. The terrain piece of choice for every player I've ever seen play a Song of Ice and Fire. When they go to the board, they're like, "Oh, I don't know what terrain to pick," and then they just go, "Oh, I'll pick a Weirwood because Weirwoods are great." It is the ubiquitous symbol of a Song of Ice and Fire and Game of Thrones. What do you think?
I think they're in a bit of a weird spot, aren't they? Because like Panic is so like all or nothing nowadays. It feels like there's so many modifiers on it that its value's really gone down. Yeah, it's still good. I suppose it's still good if you're running like bubble morale factions like Asher and Greyjoys or Manson, Free Folk, because it's starting to knock everything to like a morale 4. Then, yeah, not as it used to be effectively most games in 1.6, and this is I guess predominantly me coming from being a Lannister player, but it's 2 corpse piles, 2 Weirwoods, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
It's a lot less of that now, which is obviously good. Yeah, important, but not as important as they used to be. It's probably fair to say.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I do agree on the whole morale bubble style lists. Love to see this because basically that morale bubble becomes a 4+ morale bubble instead of the 5+ of the Asher and Mance kind of set. What's interesting about a Weirwood actually is it's interesting. What's interesting about, and Carl's right in chat here, a Weirwood is not the keywords it has, but actually the keywords it doesn't have, right?
Yeah, it doesn't slow you down or mess your charge up.
Yep, doesn't slow you down, doesn't mess your charge up. This is basically the closest you get to having open terrain. So if you need some form of terrain that's out there and being used, but you want it to not impact charging, you want it to not impact movement, you just want to have like an open space on the board, your actual best bet is to put down a Weirwood, because it guarantees that open space.
Got a pretty decent footprint as well, haven't they? So
Yeah.
if you put a 6-inch bubble around them, you're actually taking up, width-wise, probably 6-inch either side, plus probably another 4 in the middle.
Yep.
Yeah, you're taking up like 16 inches, aren't you? Something crazy. So
yeah,
it's a good shout.
The other thing, I mean, let's start talking about factions now, because I do want to kind of link terrain to faction picks, and I know I will caveat this completely, right, in that different factions want different terrain, right? That's just true. Different faction builds want different terrain, but we're talking about in a general sense of the factions. So let's run through the factions quickly. What do we think about? Let's just run through them in order. Neutrals using Weirwoods, I'd probably say no.
Bolton's still the best build, right, for neutral. Yeah. So probably no.
Yeah, probably avoid this. Maybe you put a Weirwood like at a back, like near the deployment zone, to use it as like defensively.
You're probably better off avoiding using neutrals and sticking with the Weirwoods, in all honesty. But if you're adamant on using neutrals, then yeah, avoid the Weirwood.
What faction are you using? I'm using Weirwoods.
Yeah.
Yeah. You probably want to avoid Weirwoods. I mean, I think for Stormcrow style builds, I think Weirwoods might actually be quite good. In the Stormcrow Dario side stuff, but if anyone knows Stormcrow Dario side neutral builds that work, then congratulations, because they're a complete meme. Yeah, not a fan of using Weirwoods generally in neutrals.
Going back to Cole's point, you're probably going to be outnumbered. Yep. Enemy's probably going to be faster than you. You probably want to try and slow them down with something. You probably don't want to just give them a beeline to go and whack into your Stormcrow archers, or your bastards, Bolton bastard girls, or whatever the case may be.
Yep.
your flayed men are hands down the best unit in the faction, and they don't. Yeah, I don't know why you would.
Yeah, I mean, he does make a good point of the fact that their morale is generally speaking the worst in the game, which I do agree with. It is generally, but the thing is that you don't really care, and I know it sounds really bad, but the point is like neutrals in the way that neutrals play. The Bolton side is a list that has sustain and is going to come out there and basically panic you to death and murder you to death. I think the Stormcrow side and the kind of like Bloody Mama side as well, to some extent, are a side of we're just going to generate as many attacks and as many hits as we possibly can and hope that that kills you before we die. That's basically all they do. Kind of why they suck.
Mummers especially want the train that Rob rerolls, right? Because they've got Counter Strike or whatever it is.
Yeah. Disrupt as well.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the open train, going back to the open train thing, maybe it's good because it doesn't mess your flayed man charge up, but everyone else has got flayed men anyway, so it's not like it's tit for tat in it because you play the other person's going to have them as well anyway. So
yep.
What's it now?
I mean, Weirwoods for Lannisters. This is kind of like leaning into the builds that I know that you particularly don't enjoy playing that much, but the Warrior Sun style builds with Poor Fellow and Warrior Sun spam. It's not your favourite way to play Lannisters. It's more kind of like Blood Ravens kind of style. He doesn't even like it that much, but he plays it a lot. Weirwoods surely see a lot of place in Lannister in those type builds, right?
Yeah, I would have thought so. I guess it's actually quite a small change, but all the morale for everything in the Faith side of Lannister's got a little bit worse. And actually, morale 6 on Poor Fellows. If you hit him with morale 4 with Poor Fellows, they get hit with Vicious. They're down to 6. It's actually a little bit of a problem, especially if you stack other stuff on it or the ever prominent flayed men are about. It takes them down to 7 instantly. So, yeah, I mean, it's a good shout for them, obviously, for a number of reasons.
Yeah, I think that goes without saying. Obviously, if you're running the Guardsman builds, you can use it. It kind of plays up against Lannister Supreme, but again, it's one of those things you might just stick a Weirwood on your own back, like deployment zone area. If you want a very empty board in terrain, maybe stick some terrain near your 10-inch deployment line and just go, there you go, it's a Weirwood. It's not going to impact my marching up. It's not going to do anything in that regard, and it is going to help me against like random panic bombs or like a range attack that's hoping to get some panic damage through.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the Lannister panic damage. I mean, 2 of the most horrific examples are the Red Cloaks and the Guardsmen, right? And both of them are helped by having full ranks. Yeah. So actually, it's arguably worth having a Weirwood to make sure you have full ranks. You don't lose it from panic, because your modifiers are so strong anyway that it's not really going to help most of the enemy most of the time. And yeah, like the morale has always been a bit of a Lannister issue as well, right? Like they've always, if you can fight fire with fire against Lannisters, they're normally in a bit of trouble unless you go for these sort of high sparrow builds. But yeah, I guess I mean most people go corpse pile ultimately, but yeah,
definitely. Stark's wanting to pick up a Weirwood. I'm going to straight up say yes. I think Starks and Weirwoods are very, very important. I don't know about you on that one, Chris.
Yeah, because they're normally trying to stay like on 1 or 2 ranks, aren't they, with a hardened Mormont vet in there, right? So they don't want any spike damage coming through from the panic. Yeah, I'd say Weirwood's pretty good shout for them. And also they want to get the rerolls on the charge and stuff, don't they?
Also, She-Bears love that +1 for that more often Warcry. It also means that if you're running like an Eddard NCU style stuff, you are more likely to use Eddard's tokens for healing rather than using rerolls on the panic, which is much better value in the long run. Yeah, I don't have not much to say about Starks and Weirwoods really, apart from that. Night's Watch and Weirwoods though. Do Night's Watch ever play Weirwoods? I don't think you do you?
No, you probably want something to slow people down, don't you?
Yeah.
And yeah, like you just want to shoot. I mean, if you're going through your traditional shoot people off the board builds, I mean they're quite good. I suppose they're big, so they mean people can't put forests down near them, which is good. But because if someone's running Mother of Dragons, they'll probably try and counterplay you with forests. But no, they probably don't, do they?
Thing is, there's better terrain to pick to achieve that kind of same result, I think. Yeah, they probably don't pick these. They might pick these if there's like a fourth drop is particularly dead as like a terrain pick, like the center of the board's already filled up. They might pick up a Weirwood and just think, I'm gonna drop this maybe over here to kind of like bolster up some conscripts, maybe. You know,
it can be a decent one if you want to force some. If you don't want the board to be symmetrical, maybe you can put it in one of the deployment zones because you know it's probably not going to get much use for the enemy anyway.
Yeah.
Because they'll have to come forward because if you get to the middle of the board and claim the objectives and start shooting them, they're in trouble.
Yes.
But yeah.
So, that's Night's Watch. Free folk. Free folk want to be using Weirwoods, but not all the time. My personal favourite technique is running with, as you'll probably already know, Tormund attachment in a Mance build. He comes with Stalwart. Mance sets the unit's morale to 5. Stalwart gives it +2, so you're basically morale 3. You put a Weirwood down, you're now morale 2, and that unit has Warcry. Morale 2 on a unit with Warcry, that's pretty good, because now you've got an ability that you use that's not conditional. Aren't you glad that's in the game, Chris?
Yes. I don't know. I leave that to you. You're obviously the free folk expert, but yeah, I thought they're pretty handy. I guess I'm probably guilty, just like a lot of players, of being so tied up into 1.6 mentality when it comes to terrain, and the fact that all the rules have changed and stuff like that. It's definitely in a better spot now, I would say. Much more variety, but
yeah,
yeah.
I mean, free folk Weirwoods, they're just brilliant. If you're going for the Mance builds with Tormund and stuff like that, I'd be less inclined to pick them in most scenarios, though. They're not that useful, especially when Flayed Men exist, and Flayed Men are giving you a -3 to your 7 or 8 morale anyway. Like, the Weirwood is a good addition to that, but it's not that great. Moving from a check on a 9 to moving from a check on a 10 to a check on a 9 from that kind of stuff. Yes, it's kind of good, but you're not pushing it above that. Like, it's not an 8 to 7 or a 7 to 6 kind of change. Yeah, there are better things you can pick that'll save more run, I think.
And also, like, it
Baratheons.
comes back to that old thing
Hold
with
on.
free folk, right? You're going to be forcing more panic tests than anyone else. So actually, is the corpse file better? Because in theory, you have more activations, more combat activations. You're going to force more panic tests. So mathematically, it should work out better for you in the long run, in theory. But yeah.
The Baratheons, though, Baratheons 100% picking up Weirwoods, right?
Yeah, especially Renly's side, right?
Yeah.
Because when you combine it with a decent armor, it's one of the only things they've really got going for them. Boost their morale up, boost their armor up.
It's another one as well. Like, it's another kind of double whammy in that it doesn't slow you down.
Yeah.
You know, Baratheons want all the defensive tech they can get, and for not all Baratheon builds, but a vast majority of Baratheon builds, you want to be looking at running Weirwood. I think that really covers it there. Targaryen, I'm not convinced Targaryens really care about Weirwoods, right?
I think they got better options.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Probably not too relevant. Yeah, pick it up if you want to, but I wouldn't look to it as a mainstay piece. And Greyjoy.
Yeah, especially in Asher builds, I guess. Trying to think. Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Probably. But then again, it's the same thing. They're actually quite. A lot of the builds I see running about now are very high activation.
Yes.
So maybe it's that same thing of actually you just want to force as many panic, especially if you're talking about if you've got 2 units of like bowmen or something. Maybe actually you want to slow people down and mess their charges up because you can't take a hit because you've got like wet paper, flannel armor, and crap morale. So maybe again you'd lean towards something else, but yeah.
I would tend to think that this is one of those like niche picks. So yeah, I think that's good. So that's Weirwoods. Right, we're going to do this for all of the terrain, so it's going to take us a little while, guys, but not too long. It'll get
God.
faster as we go.
20 ground special.
20 round special. So, next up, the Bog. One of my personal favourite pieces of terrain. In general, I mean, slowing people down, the 1-inch movement reduction, and now removing rerolls on the charge automatically. I feel this is a very important piece of terrain, to be honest. I don't know what your opinions of it are. Playing into it, playing with it.
Yeah, I think I like that they've differentiated it from the corpse pile.
Yeah.
So now, whereas before, obviously, the corpse pile was a bog plus, effectively. It was a bog with an extra rule.
Yeah.
I like that there's a differentiation. It's really good against like Baratheons. It's good against anything. Well, I mean, not that that's necessarily a huge concern, but anyone who hasn't got like cavalry or ranged, which I think is a big disadvantage this edition. But if you've got like a standard set of block infantry and you've no ways to really push additional movement or no range,
Yep.
it would just slow you up and mess you down, and just create a weak point.
Yeah, this is a huge thing for like infantry block style stuff. This is a nightmare. And I mean, we'll go straight into neutrals. Do neutrals really want to see a bog? Probably not.
No,
I
probably.
wouldn't think so.
No, I wouldn't say so.
If you're running a Stormcrow Archer style, I'm going to sit at the back and shoot you. Maybe, but there's better terrain to achieve that with. This is just risky. This is just really risky because you're going to remove your own benefits just as much as your opponent. Similarly with Lannister, I don't think Lannisters play bogs that much, right?
No, I mean if you hit on 4s a lot, you don't want to see bogs. So that's a lot of neutral stuff, isn't it? I mean, it's pretty much everything but flayed men and bastards girls. Lannisters. Yeah, what have Lannisters got to hit on 3s? Warriors' Sons. Yeah, red cloaks. Warriors' Sons have ways to get rerolls from their faith tokens. So actually, it's not like a terrible shout if you're going for that kind of build where you've got 2 Warriors' Sons, then likely 3 Poor Fellows, 3 NCUs, and Tyrion or High Sparrow or whatever. So they're not terrible for that. But yeah, probably not. You probably go Hawkspile ultimately. At least I would, the way I play.
Yeah, or you go for the Weirwood, like we were saying, for the buffs and your own morale. Like it's just the morale effects for those style lists are probably better. I do like the Bog edition for Bloody Mama style, like Counter-Strike style stuff. I do think that the Bog edition is especially good there because you can leverage your movement a bit more easily. But the problem is that you get affected by it more so than other people. So it is still. You've got to know when to pick a Bog with Lannister and neutral, I think. And
do you remember
when not to.
Remember pre-edition Visions of the Flame and everyone's going mad over Bloody Mamas? Have you ever seen a unit on the table? I don't think I have.
No. Oh no, I think I've played against one once. ETS.
I mean, I think. To be fair, Blackguard kind of. I'm going all over the place again, but yeah. Anyway, yeah. Carry on, move on. But yeah.
Yeah. West Coast says, I would say in most cases, bogs are great for matchups where you're playing the defensive or heal game and want to make it rough for your opponent to move around and kill you. Yeah, I would say so. Where you don't favor movement as much. The thing is that movement is generally more powerful anyway. So not favoring movement, kind of like a bad thing. Like you definitely don't want bogs if you're a Baratheon player on the board because you're never going to get anywhere. Like it completely fucks you up.
I guess it all comes down to how well are you equipped to take a charge.
Yes.
Because if you can take a charge, it's not as big of a problem. If you've got an army of like lightly armed Bloody Mama skirmishers or whatever the case may be, and you're expecting to take charges, it might be a good idea to have some bogs about to mess those charges up.
Yeah.
Unless, of course, and this just comes down to knowing your opponent's list, like do they have a reliable way to get rerolls? So if the army is 4 Stark Sworn Swords, probably wouldn't worry about the bog.
Yeah.
A waste of
agree.
time. Not Stark Sworn Swords or the other one. The Swarm Bros. The Night's Watch Swarm Bros. Yeah, anything that can get a reroll like out easily for another method, it's not a problem. But
I think
yeah,
moving on to like talking about Starks are a weird one because they hit on 4s, right? Starks want to have this kind of weird combat where they get reduced a rank to hit on 3s, maybe 2 ranks to hit on 2s, and get more out of their card play or less self wounds. But it's like you're losing dice to do it, so it's not actually increasing your output that much. But like, and Starks are entirely based around charging people. That's what they want to do. I feel like Bogs are a mistake for Starks nowadays, which is a shame. I think Starks. I mean, I remember the days where you played Starks, back in 1.6, when you were when you were playing the lore appropriate armies. And you used to pick up Bogs, right? Gladly, and just be like, I'm just going to charge through them because I don't care.
yeah. I used to like throwing dogs on stakes back in the day. To be fair, but yeah, it's
Starks are a
yeah.
very different animal now. I feel like this is not a good terrain piece for them.
I wish Starks were better. I really. They're probably. I feel more confident winning games with Baratheons than I would Starks personally.
Which is weird. I mean,
But,
I've talk about it later, but I'm moving on to Starks next, and I actually quite like them. I really like Starks. I really like some of the balance as well that they've got. And it's interesting building lists with them, which I didn't enjoy with other factions, but more on that later. Night's Watch, Bogs. Yes.
yeah. Like, why not? I mean, well, take whatever. Doesn't really matter. But yeah, Bogs. I suppose.
Stick a big object that makes people slow in front of your crossbowman. I'll take that.
Probably the only thing I would say is not Bogs if you're playing Targaryens, because they have got cards which ignore it, and the Danny NCU that I really like, the starter set one, gives you rerolls. But other than that, I mean, if you're using Night's Watch and you're using if you're talking about like this in depth about what terrain selecting, you're going to win. If you've got awful duffel crossbow, then just pick whatever. Doesn't really matter if they're not playing Targaryens.
It probably doesn't matter.
Yeah, you'll probably be all right.
Moving on to Free Folk then, and I know Terra in chat said he has your grit and Free Folk, so Bogs are ace, and yeah, I agree. Free Folk, Bogs are lovely. First of all, you don't have to deal with the bloody stupid -1 to your morale effect, which can be a massive pain in the ass. But your grit, obviously giving you the rerolls or basically ignoring the negatives of a bog, is massive, 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 because you can really basically just ignore the terrain piece, and that's huge. I also like it for the reverse, in that you can give your opponent another -1 on top of the bog's -1, and giving a unit of like -2 movement is absolute sadness. Like absolute sadness.
This goes back to these are the poster boys for getting Free Folk are the poster boys for getting charged and not wanting to die.
Yeah.
And like, it's like that that Walrus Chieftain guy or whatever his name is.
Yep.
Like, who's 2 points. You could probably save yourself the 2 points if you just put 2 bogs down.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I think this is a good shout for them for a number of reasons, and also, like, Vow is almost an auto include if I'm up to snuff on my free folk meta list still. So she's gonna help you getting slowed down is not going to be as much of an issue necessarily compared to your opponent, especially if you slap a grit on top.
Terra says corpse piles. We'll talk about corpse piles in a bit, Terra, because I do think they're overpicked. But yeah, generally speaking, people do favour corpse piles for a lot of factions. I do think bogs have got a very big place though. The -1 move is not something that you should throw away when considering certain matchups, and the difference that means in certain control matchups in controlling tokens. That's massive for the control of certain tokens in certain games.
It's a huge change, isn't it? Knocking like a 3+ charge to a 4+ charge, and guess what? If you make it in, you're not re-rolling. Yeah. Is massive, game-changingly massive. So, like, yeah, it's important. It is important, definitely. Yeah. Like, they are an important piece.
Now I'm going to say something super controversial next about Bogs and Baratheons. Bogs and Baratheons are a tale of two halves. Number one, no, don't pick Bogs and put them not on the centre line. If you're a Baratheon player and picking Bogs and they're not on the centre line, you really, really better know what you're doing, because it's probably stupid. However, counterpoint, Baratheons with Bogs on the centre line around central objectives isn't a terrible idea. Bear with me on this one, Chris. You've played quite a few Baratheons in things like ELO events, right? That
Yeah,
three,
I just like
that 3
I
plus
just like shoot
armor.
people with R'hllor Faithful.
That's
Not
fair
what
enough.
the Lightbringers.
That 3 plus armor though, and like Counter Strike from Wardens or something like that, actually a pain in the arse if you can put a Bog in the middle of the field and you don't get rerolls against it.
Yeah, it's not a bad choice, but it comes down to this: are you expecting to get absolutely mauled on the charge?
Yeah.
Yes or no? I suppose what is good about it is if you're playing missions where someone can take the objective off you if they've got more ranks after the attack. If this stops that happening initially, because the problem with Baratheons is you'll always struggle to get it back.
Yep.
Back off someone. So I guess it can be good for that. It depends on what you're playing. If you can guarantee you can still get there with a decent amount of speed. I've always surprised how people don't really talk about Courtney Penrose's Prosperity of the Crown ability, where you can take the crown and do a free march turn one, get an objective, maybe be sat on a bog. Yeah, it's good. So
I actually use that exact idea to control the center objective with Courtney in nearly every Baratheon game I play, because I can just plonk him in Wardens, sit on the middle objective, and go, right, well, fuck it. I'm never going to attack with Courtney as well. I've got issue commands in my hand. He's just going to sit there in the middle of the field telling other people to charge and attack, and hopefully clear up the rest of your forces.
I mean, it's not like the most amazing tactic in the world or anything.
No,
and
not.
It's still in Baratheons, but like it's pretty good what they can do.
It's, as things go, it's not trash.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's the neutral subfaction Baratheons. Yes, Mikhail, we're talking about the neutral subfaction Baratheons, and the neutral subfaction of Baratheon, the subfaction of Renly and Stannis. Bogs have a place, but yeah, you don't put Bogs on approaches to objectives because that's just a hide into losing a game with Baratheons. Targaryen, I think they quite like Bogs, mainly because most of the time they don't care. They just maneuver off it and then do something.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, yeah, but Boggs is one of the top Targaryen picks, I would say. Slows everyone else down. You've got cards which ignore it. Danny NCU gives you the rerolls. Yeah, like it's generally helps your positional game. Even if you go the Unsullied route, you do not want to charge a block of Unsullied in the front or even in the side in a bog, because it's just fucking. You might as well just punch yourself in the face at that point. But yeah, it's Targ's best friend, I think.
Punch yourself in the face. I charged the flank of a pikeman unit over a bog.
Oh, and they need to get rid of that rule. They just need to get rid of the side thing.
Not only did he hit me first, but then he also blocked like 3 of the hits because I haven't done any wounds to them, and life is sad.
Oh, you've played well and got on my side. Gutted. I beat you at the list building stage.
Now take a rank of damage, and I ignore your damage output.
Yeah, it's just I'm not a fan. Except for charge, current except for charge.
Exactly.
But yeah, like it's I would say it's the top Targaryen pick unless you're playing. Well, we'll get to it when we get to Woods, but
yeah. Woods. And finally, Greyjoys. Mikkel's in chat. He'll probably say that Greyjoys love Bogs or don't love Bogs. He'll probably put his opinion about that in a second. But
he'll say one of the two options.
One of 2 options. Those are your only 2 picks, Mikkel.
He could say they're average. To be fair. No,
that's not an option, Chris. We only deal in extremes here. We're Sith, don't you know? We're the Sith of A Song of Ice and Fire. No. I think Greyjoys probably don't mind Bogs. It comes back to what you were saying before. Bogs and Trappers makes a 4-point unit that's annoyingly hard to kill. especially with Asher 5-point unit with Warcry. Just frustrating. And they don't want to lose units on the charge, right? That's a big thing, is that Greyjoys really don't want to use the units on the charge, because forcing out those early what is dead may never die may just end the game early for them. They want to take those large activation advantage builds that we've seen through to later game value.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think Bowmen are a good choice. I think Reavers are a good choice. And if you've got a plan to get Reavers or 2 pillage to hitting on 2s, actually the lack of rerolls won't be as big of an issue to you as it will be to your opponent.
Yeah.
Depends on your list. Only depends on your list, I suppose. But yeah, I'll let others speak. But I'd guess I think I'd still like Quartz Piles for the Bowmen. But
He says hug bogs, embrace them if you're playing versus cavalry. Which I agree. Certainly with Greyjoy. Lack of internal cavalry options. So that's bogs. They're pretty good. I would say so far we've had Weirwoods and bogs. I think bogs have probably got more value actually in a lot of games for a lot of factions, but Weirwoods are probably picked more often. And come on to it, and we'll tier rank them at the end. But I think we've kind of agreed in the way we've talked about them is that bogs probably actually have more value than Weirwoods, right?
yeah, I think as I was saying earlier, I think Panic is like an almost all or nothing mechanic nowadays, because the D3 damage isn't like that much of a deal unless you're playing like Lannister Red Cloaks where they're spamming a million of them, or you play dragons that are giving you huge modifiers and are just adding on wounds to their already high auto wound count. So yeah, I think like it's almost like you're using I think Weirwoods nowadays, in a lot of cases, is like using a plaster to try and heal up a cut off limb or something. Like you're not going to stop the bleeding, so just leave it.
It definitely is interesting. I don't look to Weirwoods at all anymore as a piece of terrain I want to use in the matchup. Instead, it's a tech piece that I usually put down like a Weirwood somewhere late on or early on for that exact what we talked about earlier, clear pathways and things like that. All right then, moving on. The forest, the wood. This has become its own really unique piece of terrain in the last edition. It was, to put it bluntly, in 1.6. Did you ever see these things?
No.
No, they were shite. That's the blunt, honest truth of them, guys. No one ever saw these. They're crap. 1.7 2021. These guys get picked quite a lot. As we know, ranged has kind of seen a bonus because the number of melee defensive abilities has gone up. Therefore, ranged has gotten better. I like a good forest every now and then. You know.
I think their credentials against ranged are a bit oversung.
Yes.
In all honesty, unless you've got a solo unit, which is why dragons love them. But the fortified rule, the +1 to your armor save, is good, and it doesn't slow you down. It might actually be one for Baratheons as well, to be fair.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think its main pull is the cover ability. I don't think that comes into play that often, in all honesty, unless you're hiding dragons in it, which is stupid. But
yeah, we'll come on to that in a second.
Yeah.
You're right. I do like the idea that it will block like the majority of a line of sight of a marching unit up behind it, so you kind of can get close. And there are scenarios where having your own ranged unit inside it can't get shot back at, and that leads to all kinds of weird game state scenarios where you can kind of have like a no-go zone for your opponent unless he charges it with lots of stuff. But yeah, fortified is really good. For
I
neutrals, oh, gone.
I was gonna say the issue with that shooting in and out thing is that normally the quality of the shooting units is so lopsided. Like the game's balance for shooting units is pretty all over the place. So you've got obviously the Night's Watch with Watch Captain like as the top tier, goes all the way down to Lannister crossbowmen, and like I don't know, like you just generally don't see them if they. I don't know how often that whole shooting thing. You don't really tend to see shooting units shooting at each other that much, because generally one is obviously stronger than the other, so the opponents you don't line them up against the person's strongest shooting unit because they'll just get tabled.
And they get obliterated as well. literally obliterated.
Yeah, because the rubbish ones are really rubbish.
Yeah.
And the good ones are really, really good.
Yeah.
And then Stormcrow Archers are in the middle somewhere.
Average neutral units, gotta love them. So neutrals, you're probably not going to look at a forest, I don't think. I just don't think it gives you what you want.
No, you probably just go for Corpse Piles. But yeah, yeah, I wouldn't wouldn't be the top of my list.
No. Lannisters probably not again. Not massively.
No, I think you've got better picks. It's not like a bad pick. It'd probably be in the middle of stuff they would pick from.
It might be to tech piece I might put for a commander holding an objective, knowing I'm playing against a ranged like heavy army. I'd just be able to sit my commander in the wood and at least go. At least you're gonna have to come over and deal with me, rather than just stand over there and shoot me to death. If I'm running like a poor fellow unit, with Jamie or something like that. But yeah, I'm not.
Yeah, it could be a good pick for honed and ready.
Yeah, but there are better options that can kind of, unless the opponent's a lot of range, there are better options. Starks, maybe. The Fortified's a big killer for Starks. That's the problem. Charging through a forest to give your opponent +1 to armor save when you don't have Sundering just on like everything. That's actually kind of problematic.
I think armor is one of Stark's biggest problems anyway. So I don't know why you would compound that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean that double blow of Tally Cav being rubbish and Berserkers losing Sundering was big to Starks. I mean that might be completely different come January, but I suspect that they'll get more Sundering. At least I hope they will. But yeah, not a great choice.
Really do like Woods. I know that Carl mentioned it earlier with Boggs and Howland. I do quite like Howland with Woods if you're using like Mira and Jojen Bowman, things like that, to control those arcs and to be like, right, well, you can't see me, but I can see you. That style of gameplay with the Stark Bowman, so you can have your Stark Bowman kind of protected from your opponent's range units while you've got an infantry unit in front of them tanking away. That has some merit to it, I think, but forests.
It doesn't work against the Warden combo, does it, though? Because the Warden sees through to trigger the order, and then it's shooting. I just think you'd be better off with a Bog.
I prefer it with Howland rather than against Howland. I wouldn't put Forest against Howland, that's the thing. But if I was playing Howland, I do like these to hit the board. Especially against Targaryens, as we'll talk about later. Night's Watch. I mean, don't pick Forests. It's just probably like making your life a little bit harder, unless you get to deploy in them or reach them first. In which case, who gives a fuck? Speaking of someone,
I mean, you'd probably still be alright if you pick them.
I have charged Night's Watch Crossbowmen through a forest before, and you thought things were sad. Try charging across a wall or a forest into Night's Watch Crossbowmen. That's fucking sadness. That's like, oh, I charged you and you deleted 2 of my ranks, and I killed less than a rank of you in the return.
Yeah, now you've got like a 4-up armor save and a 5-up morale, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, mad.
And now I'm in combat with you, and you've still got actions left on your unit to either retreat or attack me in melee. I am sad. Yeah, I wouldn't value it. Free Folk has some value. Again, like the ranged impact just isn't as high as people think. For a lot of factions, so it can be used to kind of stem the bleeding a little bit from the ranged heavy, like Night's Watch Crossbowman style list we see, but it doesn't stop it that much. Like, there are ways they can play around it. There are things they can do. It just stems it a little bit in the very early stages, maybe. That's about it.
As I say, I think the cover rule is massively overvalued unless you got if you want to run Mag the Mighty, maybe. If you want to run a Mag army, you can strategically have trees halfway up the board. If your opponent's got a lot of shooting, saves you having to waste that Craster Hill early and all the other stuff. But yeah, probably not. And their armor's general free folk armor's crap, and they haven't got Sundering, so you're just digging yourself a hole, I think.
Baratheon's forests, like I was saying, parking a Baratheon unit in a forest with fortified and some cover from range attacks, which is one of the things that Baratheons suffer greatly against because they don't have ways realistically to close that distance outside of the cavalry. I think that's not a terrible idea. You know what? It's not a terrible idea. I'm not going to say it's amazing and like, oh, it's the best since sliced bread, but it's an option that you can definitely tech into. If your opponent's going to be ranged heavy, why not stick something that might protect against one shot or prevent one shot against a commander unit? Probably kind of worth it.
I would just say make sure you get to that forest first.
Oh god, yeah.
Because again, they don't have a lot of access to Sundering, do they?
No. Ours
So
in theory, I think, is it.
yeah, like you're just not going to dig anyone out of it. But if you can get in first, yeah, it's great for all the reasons you've just spoke about. Up there with Bogs.
Classic Baratheon problem. If you can get there first, can I? Well, that's where round 1 and round 2 come in play a lot. Targaryens, go on, say your piece about dragons, because this is just sadness. People have never done this. This is utter sadness.
You can fit a dragon in it, which means obviously, yeah. I mean, it's one of like the counter pick plays against Offal. This because you effectively are immune to a Song of Ice and Fire while you're in there. You're just immune to the game because they can't shoot you. Conscripts aren't going to go into that forest to come get you out. So yeah. So if you can get like I mean, having said that, crossbowmen with a load of Offal cards on because they all work in combat as well for some god unknown reason. Can do a decent job of kicking the shit out of you, but yeah, like they're just the perfect counter pick if you're running Mother of Dragons into Offal because you can just hide a dragon in there, and unless they've got the Bolt Thrower Scorpion, they can't shoot you, and you can fit the whole tray in there. So yeah, it's the perfect counter pick, but it's not bad anyway. If you've got the shooty outrider guys, they can sit in there and shoot out like you were saying. So yeah, there's a lot to recommend them for Targaryens. I think them and Bogs are probably their two picks, the two things they want to see.
Yep. Targaryens just like terrain actually, with the changes to Unstoppable Advance and being able to destroy Destructible as well, which we'll come on to. They just like to see quite interesting terrain picks. One of my personal favourite moments I've ever played was watching my opponent put 3 units in a forest at the end of one turn. And then I proceeded to the very first thing he activated on his round. I was playing Howland Starks and doing the thing that makes terrain dangerous. And he didn't have Unstoppable Advance in hand. And I was like, yeah, that unit of Harakar, your opponent, like your Carl's unit of veterans, and the unit of Outriders that are all touching that forest, if you want to do any actions, if you want to move, it's all of the above keywords, and you're going to take D3+1 wounds. And then he was like, hang on, I can't even get some of these units out with the free maneuver. And he's like, that's 2 D3+2 wounds then. That is savage. That is full on savage when you pull that.
Yeah, so yeah, don't do it against Howland.
Yeah, don't do it against Howland.
But if you're running Targaryens against Starks, you're probably all right anyway.
Yeah, there are other things you can do.
Yeah, you're not lost for choices.
I think Greyjoys are in the same barrier as kind of talking about free folk in that like they don't mind too much, but it really depends on how they're using it. And that seems to be a theme that we're seeing a lot with the Forest, even though it, in theory, is a popular pick because people think that it should be good. It's very much a tech piece that actually is like, it has use, but really there's other terrain you probably want first, right?
Yeah, like it would be better if it was, if it blocks off, 3/4 of your opponent's trade, but then you get into a really messy situation where that's one thing the game has kind of stuck away from, which is good. So I'm glad they haven't pulled that in. But yeah, like I'd just say, I think the cover rule is massively overrated for what it does. It doesn't do anywhere near as much as people think it does.
Yep. I agree. Moving on to the most popular piece of terrain in the planet for A Song of Ice and Fire. Have you played a game of A Song of Ice and Fire where somebody hasn't picked this piece of terrain or someone hasn't considered it?
It must be the highest picked terrain piece.
I'm convinced. I am
I mean, I've played a bit of everything, play a bit of everything, but Lannisters are my go-to, and I tend to play them a bit more traditionally to what Carlo would, for example, so a bit more panic-based. Yeah, like they're great. They're great for Lannisters for a few reasons. One, the panic damage, the help to panic, but also Lannisters are a slower faction, more likely to get charged. Robbing opponents' rerolls is good. They've got access to weakened quite easily thanks to Pycelle. Yeah, like Lannisters love these.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always lean towards talking about Lannisters, don't I? Yeah, Lannisters love them. So ultimately, the best terrain piece.
And
same for neutrals for pretty much the exact same reasons. Although not as much access to weakened unless you want to take the goat for some reason.
The goat. Yeah, I mean, I would probably suggest that this is probably picked up by neutrals and Lannisters more so than any other faction in the game. I think neutrals and Lannisters absolutely love to see these two crossing the first two factions off our list, simply because they just allow them to play into what they're good at. They double down on what they're already doing well. I do think it sometimes plays over the top a little bit too much, in that it ends up doubling down on what they're already doing well, and it doesn't shore up a weakness that they have, which can be problematic. There is too much of a good thing sometimes. So
Maybe. I mean, just generally though, Lannisters don't want to charge that much. They're happier being charged and absorbing hits through, weakened tokens and no rerolls from this and decent armor save and
four-point units.
Yeah, like generally speaking, I think it reinforces all the strengths in a good way, in all honesty. But yeah, it's a fair point. Yeah.
So, Starks. I think Starks are in a really weird place with Corpse Piles because they really want them to be aggressive. But they're kind of a defensive piece of tech now almost. And I feel that the losing the rerolls sucks. To put it bluntly, for Starks, that really sucks. For the -1 morale, that's really good though, because your morale's not terrible on Starks. It's not great, but it's not terrible.
It's a net loss, massive net loss for them.
It is,
-1 to the morale for no rerolls.
I just don't think you can justify it, can you?
Nah, it's a non-starter, I would say.
So, yeah.
They don't really have any panic builds either, do they? Like none of their units have vicious, apart from like Shaggy Dog. Yeah, I would. I mean, back in the day, they would love them because it's anything to just knock the damage up that one extra point back in 1.6. But now they're so far away from like that power damage rating of 10 that it's probably about 6. So if this knocks it up to a 7, it's not. Yeah, well, I mean,
yeah,
it's not worth it. No access to rerolls readily. Nothing I can think of anyway, off the top of my head. I'm sure there are stuff that people will be frantically typing in the chat.
I will actually go to chat quickly. Terino says that you still get to. He talks about using random terrain a lot more, and hence the reason obviously Corpse Piles don't get picked by them as much because they're using random. Obviously, it's really strange. Obviously, a lot of people don't play random anymore. Some people still do, some people don't. The tournament standard, or the standard we're used to talking about, is not playing random. Playing chosen terrain is more strategic and more realistic. Which it is actually more realistic to play chosen terrain. People think that random terrain is more realistic. Not true. As a battlefield commander, go and read Battlefield history, honestly. People didn't randomly have terrain on their battlefield. What they did is they chose terrain to have a battlefield at, where the terrain was good for them. And actually, what you find is that kind of meeting engagements, which were quite rare, but are like the theme of what Song of Ice and Fire is based around. Meeting engagements were formed where either one party couldn't go anywhere else, they couldn't retreat, or where both parties believed that the terrain was beneficial for their army.
Bloody
Um,
nerd.
I know, right? And that's actually why a lot of battles occurred, is that both people believe that it was true. So I get that people sometimes say it's more realistic, but it's not. Yeah.
That's why in season 8 of Game of Thrones, when they thought it was a good idea to have all the siege equipment outside the castle.
Yeah, totally. That was such a great
It's like one
such
of
a great
those ones,
episode.
isn't it?
I have to admit, I don't remember season 8 in the same way that I don't remember what I had for breakfast because I scrubbed it from my memory.
No, you need to remember because you might accidentally watch it otherwise.
Yeah, it's true
You might,
actually.
might rewatch it if you forget how bad it is.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing with random all Scots players is picking bugs to recreate Bannockburn. Um, I will straight up say that I do think random terrain has its benefits. I do think that random terrain is good for people who are used to seeing the same stuff. If players are picking the same stuff every game, then people need to pick and play random terrain to shake it up. I think what's interesting is we're talking about good and bad picks today, but too many players don't think about the picks that they're making. That's actually the thing that me and Chris, we're going to move on to. And hopefully what we're trying to give you the insight today is that too many players just pick a Weirwood or pick a Corpse Pile.
My, my,
And
my,
yeah,
my preference is always towards picked, in all honesty. I think it's one of the things, generally speaking, I think it's one of the things that can help equalise poor lists. Like, obviously, there's an argument that because obviously both players can pick, but in the current matchups, I think it's one of the only ways that armies have got a chance. Some armies have got a chance against Night's Watch, for example. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I've always preferred picked personally. Like the LGT was picked, but part of that was a practical reason as well. Like, what do you do if someone doesn't have the terrain pieces they need?
yeah.
Like they've rolled up, so it's just a practicality thing. But yeah, I'd rather. I wish in the tournament pack they just said this is the default,
Well,
one way or the other.
they
But
they kind of do in that they say in the main rules they say it's pick terrain, but there are alternatives. And I've got no problem with there being alternatives, but I do think picked is a generally speaking better system. And as you say, once if it's random, you you don't remove it, but you're removing a skill element in some ways from the game. Right? It's not completely removed because where you place it when you roll it obviously is part of a skill element and how you can use it. But actually you lower the skill cap of the game because some pieces of terrain simply don't have a skill cap, right? A Weirwood, on the most part, doesn't have a skill cap. It's either there or it's not. It doesn't really impact the game the rest of the way. Whereas picked terrain is very much a skill check at the start of the game, which means random terrain actually makes it fairer, inverted commas, but it doesn't actually make a matchup fairer.
I think that
Weird.
one of my main problems with random, and this is obviously would be easily rectified, could be easily rectified, but is that 3 pieces feel far too sparse and 5 feels cluttered.
Yeah. I also
and
hate the table, for what it's worth. I don't
uh,
understand why 7 is pick your own, and like 8 and 6 are pieces of terrain that generally don't get picked otherwise. It's like, why is that the thing? Just confuses me.
yeah, I mean it's a small thing I suppose overall, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's yeah, my preference is picked, but
Yeah.
happy with whatever really.
D3 random and 2 picked. That's interesting. I don't dislike that. I'd have to think about it a bit more as to. I think I'd like 2 pick 2 random. I'd rather consistency, but I can see maybe there's some element to that. So Corpse Piles with Night's Watch. Yes, More damage to your opponent, please. Thumbs up.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, love it.
Yeah.
Stick them down. Who cares? Free folk corpse piles are okay. We were talking about the removing the need or worry of the -1 on the rerolls. The big thing with free folk and corpse piles though is that -1 morale is useful against like units taking more damage off. But it's a real nightmare if you don't have lots of ways to ignore it. If you're not taking your grit and you can't promise that your grit's in a game, it starts to become a sad day. I've run free folk against like Jaime Halberd Lannisters so much, and it's like, not only when I charge you, you're going to attack me, but you've probably made me weakened, and you've probably fucking intrigue and subterfuge your grit. So I've literally got no way to get rerolls unless I play my one card that gives me rerolls on the charge. And I'm going to be really sad when I do so.
Yeah, I mean, you'd be in a losing position if that charge had to happen for the game to continue for you.
Yeah, it's
then
already
you've probably
a bad
lost the
place.
game anyway. Like, yeah, if you're making the decision to do that, you've probably lost the game already.
It's a hard one though. It's definitely a hard one. I think free folk like them. I do think free folk like them. I just don't think they can rely on them fully. It also pushes one shot, Blade Men one shotting territory like to the next level on free folk. Certainly raiders. If you're not using it directly. Baratheon and corpse piles, yeah, certainly for like the Stannis side stuff, I think is okay. I don't think Renly wants to see a corpse pile. God forbid.
Rennie doesn't. I think I really like R'hllor Lightbringers. I think they're good, and obviously they work well with them for a number of reasons. But yeah, Renly does not want to see them.
Yeah. Targaryen corpse piles. I don't think I've ever really seen a Targaryen go for a corpse pile style build.
You're probably slightly better off with the bog, or the forest, depending if you're playing that one matchup. But it is worth highlighting that one matchup because in top tournament play, it will be very consistent. You'll see it consistently. Yeah, it's not bad, is it? But probably the bog.
And this is again, going Greyjoys. Do they really want to be using corpse piles?
I think they do. Going back to that same argument with Free Folk, where most of the Greyjoy builds I'm seeing are like 5, even 6 combat activations, which means a lot of attacks going out. The Bowman attack is crap, but if it can get one through, that extra point of damage will help. It robs rerolls of your opponent, which is important because unless you're Iron Makers, you've got wet flannel armor. Yeah, like, I think it's a good choice for them, personally.
So corpse pile, I mean, it's definitely a big one for neutrals and Lannisters, and we heard they're like Free Folk and Greyjoys don't mind terribly. Maybe a tech piece up for Baratheon, but Stark, Targs probably not looking to it. Night's Watch don't give a shit. It's up there as probably one of the most commonly picked pieces. We talked about it at the start, but having just done that a little bit of analysis, now obviously it's down to builds and we are generalizing. There's maybe half the factions there that are probably wanting to pick it up. So I can see why it's being played, but probably not at the rate that it is picked. I think people over rely on corpse piles and overpick them, actually, personally.
I think a lot of it's legacy, isn't it? Because in 1.6 it was, for a number of reasons, like a go-to piece. For a lot of factions, either because they had rules like Starks that ignored it, or Lannisters needed it to push through panic damage, or whatever the case may be. But yeah, and of course Feast for Crows, you see them up to 4 of them a game as well.
Yes.
But yeah, I think it's predominantly legacy is the reason they're picked. Is people playing 1.6. Be interested if there was any way to collate the information if new players used them or not as much.
I think they're very like Weirwoods. I think Corpse Piles and Weirwoods are very easy to analyze for a new player because a +1 morale or a -1 to my opponent feels like an easy thing to go. That's like more damage or less damage from panic attacks. Or panic checks because I'm more likely to pass or more likely to fail. But like, I think from like the higher level stuff, that's not really. I'm not picking them because of the +1/-1 to the attacks that often. I think it's got other benefits or other things that I'm thinking about. So yeah, I don't know. It's a weird one. Moving on. Palisades. I mean, I'm hesitant to talk about Palisades in relation to each individual faction, because I think Palisades really depend on unit types, right?
I just feel like a knob whenever I use them, because if I use them, I'm using them with the intention of covering 50% of my tray, so I can't be charged.
Yes,
Um,
100%. That's exactly what you're
so
using them for.
yeah, it feels like a bit of a knobbish thing. It depends on how you're playing. I guess that's something I need to get over,
Yes,
though.
definitely.
Like going to tournaments with mod and not using mod because I feel bad. Yeah. So maybe I just need to grow up, but grow up here. But yeah, it feels a bit. I mean, they are good for various factions for various reasons, but
They are. I mean, they are the ranged units, like literal wet dream, right? They are. You can't charge my unit, and I'm gonna sit here all day and shoot you.
they would probably be a lot more popular if you put the terrain down after determining sides, which would obviously be stupid because there'd be no terrain down. But what I'm getting at is that if you could guarantee that there would be one, 6 inches up from where your ranged unit deployed, and you can just march them up and sit them behind it. If you could guarantee that, they'd probably be very, very popular. But because you can't guarantee that for a number of reasons, you probably won't.
Yeah.
But in like Game of Thrones, if you could ensure that one was in like shooting range of the central objective, and you could put them right up in the face and just start wailing on whoever's in the middle, they'd probably be really popular. But it's just that fact of, well, there's a 50-50 chance almost that you won't, and actually getting your opponent to pick the side is generally perceived as the better option for a number of reasons, predominantly being able to pick the matchups and stuff like that. But if all that wasn't the case, I think it'd be more popular. But as
I
it isn't,
think
it isn't.
Mikel sums it up really well there. And I think a lot of higher level players do use them a lot more. I think Palisades are abused by high level or high skill players, and I would tend to agree. Palisades are mercilessly abused at the top end of the game. I will freely admit, as Chris did, I use them to charge block all the time. Night's Watch players use to charge block all the time. High skill players and high skill games, people are going to use Palisades, and they're not using them for anything more realistically than charge blocking. Terrano's not terribly wrong though. Some players do pick them up against free folk and put them on like the edges to basically say, look, the game board is now narrower. Which against free folk players, if they're running the high activation style stuff, it funnels them slightly, and I agree that prevents the flanking, and it means you can kind of control the battlefield a lot more. I know it's something you used to do, Chris, sometimes with your old Lannisters against like Starks.
I do think that word choice is very informative, though. He uses them to abuse the charge blocking rules, and it does feel. Again, this is me being a wet wipe probably, but it feels bad. Like even in like tournament games, I feel a bit bad to use them. But yeah, like they're very good, and used to see a lot of them in like real high end tournament TTS play, especially like the Stark Mirror, because I think as someone's commented, just realised I can look at all the comments and people are saying, we direwolves love them.
Yeah.
Old direwolves. I mean, new direwolves are so crap it doesn't really matter anyway. But like the old ones love them. So, and I suppose dragons love them to a certain extent as well. But
they used to. I mean, do you remember back in the day where dragons can shoot fire? They used to abuse these. That was. I'm glad people didn't have to see that.
Controversial. I think mod's better now than she was.
Oh no.
Relative to the field, like in a direct, obviously, like if you played 1.6 mod against 2021 mod, 1.6 mod will fucking trash you. But I think that's
relative
compared to the field, relative to the field, all of their natural predators have got a lot weaker. Like
she has
Starks, free folk trappers.
she's still the strongest commander in Targaryens. Targaryens in general are better than they were in 1.6. And as you say, the rest of the field has gotten comparatively weaker. And to be honest, dragons haven't really changed that much in terms of their damage output, which is just ridiculous. So, I mean, if anyone didn't see range attack dragons and palisades, though, like, it was the dumbest shit you could see. Like, dragons walking up behind something like this and then shooting fire, like, just round the corner of it and burning half your unit, and then you activate and you go, I activate and destroy the palisade. That's my turn. And the dragon just goes, I'm just going to shoot you again then. Or charge you. Right?
Or just fly over you, yeah.
Fly over you,
or
yeah.
Free folk trappers with the steer on them. So anyway, yeah, I'm sure everyone's glad to us to go down memory lane. I guess yeah, it makes us feel a bit better about some of the stuff in 2021.
It
maybe.
does. Going through the factions super quick. Neutrals, again, probably using them with charge blocking. You probably don't want them elsewhere, really. You don't benefit massively from them. Maybe against a free folk, as I say, to limit the size of the field or a Greyjoy. Lannister, exactly the same arguments as true for neutrals, I think. You're probably not looking to use them unless you're looking to limit the field size. Starks, maybe use them, I think. You can break up... What's interesting about Starks is you can break up play with Starks and start to leverage your higher movement units a little bit more. That has advantage that Starks can really use. We talk about Direwolf using them as well and abusing them. Outside of that, not a huge amount. Night's Watch, you will be using these if you're playing Gunline. Like, they're just a non-question. Free folk don't like them anymore, I don't think. They're more of a pain in the arse to deal with. They feel bad to deal with anyway. Baratheon, maybe you do. You maybe put them on the board because you're out-activated anyway. You might as well put something on the sides of the board. Make it a bit easier for you. Again, probably charge blocking though. Targaryen? Maybe, I guess.
Yeah, good for dragons.
Yeah.
And they can crash through them with that card, can't they?
Yeah.
Even though they're on
impassable.
Impassable, yeah. Yeah, they're more of an annoying high-end tech piece, which more I do think the abuse, that word abuse, is the right word. I feel a bit bad using them, but yeah, they are good.
Using the rules to someone's advantage, even though it feels silly sometimes.
Mate, I'm trying to sell tournament tickets here. I've got to come across as a semi-decent guy at some point.
Mate,
I can't rely on Carlo to do it.
You're literally known on today's show as not quite Carlo, and we all know Carlo's a proper tosser, so you're only like a mid-level tosser.
Well, that's some oldie English there for people listening overseas.
It is, yeah. All right, the stakes, the stakes, the do you remember in the days where you used to? We talked about it earlier, but do you remember the days where you used to read lore? Chris used to be a lore head, and you loved the Starks because of their lore. Nothing to do with the power level of the faction whatsoever. You said you used to run dials over the stakes, which is still the funniest shit in the world.
Yeah, there used to be a combo where you throw them on if something died, you got to reactivate basically, and they had 2 wounds, so it'd be an auto death. So you would just line up 3 dogs in the snakes and just have your super unit Tally Cav
3
smash up.
Enemy.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, it was pretty dumb. I'm glad it's not about anymore, to be fair.
I'm no word of a lie for people who didn't see it. I have literally seen a Sansa Tully Cav build with 3 direwolves that would literally run a direwolf charge with a Tully Cav, run a direwolf over the stakes, die, reactivate the Tully Cav. Next round, the Tully Cav go. Next turn, the Tully Cav go anyway. The turn after that, dead direwolf, reactivate, boom, done. Then Sansa the card back, old Sansa. Direwolf, done. Tully Cavalier's gone again. And you no word of a lie with Rob, because you could do the charge and then retreat out. You could legitimately pull like 4 or 5 charges with 1 unit in a round that was designed around charging. It was absolutely brutal.
Bear in mind, people complained less about that than they did Offal. They do waffle.
I
So
mean,
that's how.
I have seen people get one shot by a unit.
I said, yeah, mate, I've had it happen to me. Yeah, fair enough.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, well played. Um. Oh God, those are the days, eh? Those are the days. Um. Right. New stakes though. A neutral's going to be picking up new stakes.
Yeah, maybe. Um, they're not a bad choice, are they? But I don't know. I think they're like a very they're more inflexible bog essentially, where you can the bog you can use as a cover of some sort and then march on if you gain an advantage in the game. Whereas this might impede an advantage you could press that the bog would only slightly interfere with, but this would massively or the corpse pile, but this would like massively interfere with. Neutrals don't generally, and this will be true of any army that doesn't have access to a lot of activations, will have to waste time cutting it down if they need to get past it. So yeah, generally speaking, not necessarily great for neutrals, I would say.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. Lannisters. Now, this is actually a very interesting question. Where's
Yeah,
your?
you can march the tramps over it. Poor fellows, they'll just heal up. So poor fellows kind of like it. It's not even that they like it. It's just that you can risk deploying it on one side of the board, and if you don't end up on that side of the board, it's not like a huge deal. But it can slow your opponent down. So if you want to disjoint their battle line or something like that, it's pretty good. And also, you don't really. Lannisters are one of those armies with red cloaks and access to super flayed men, which are essentially flayed men with access to the Lannister deck. Are in a more one-shot territory, so you don't want to be taking like 3 wounds off the bat because they will just come in and punch you in the face and one-shot you.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're a good pick. I don't know, it's a bit weird, isn't it? You don't see them a lot because I think they're like a very good like second choice almost for a lot of factions, but I think they're better choices nearly for every other fact. It's the same with all these long pieces. You don't tend to see these long pieces as much.
Not unless
Personally.
It's high level play, and that's actually one of the other things is that when I'm playing high level games against like in tournaments or stuff like that, or you see some of the stuff that goes on TTS and things. And most of the people here have maybe made it to top tables at tournament end games. So you're playing against probably other good players, or other very good players, I should say. They make more of an appearance, whereas I agree at like the lower end tables, if people getting into the game, they typically don't pick these pieces up as often. I find, because the perceived value is a lot lower, and I do agree that the perceived value is a lot lower. They have to be understood and used to get value out of them. They're not just a piece on the board that gets value naturally. So I do agree there, because they're smaller pieces as well. That's part of the reason.
You tend to see them in Feast for Crows, where people will mirror, and you'll have stakes on one side of a corpse pile, and then on the opposite side of the board you have stakes on the other side. Because you'll put your commander on the side where there's no stakes on your side of the board, if that makes any sense to anyone listening, and it just protects your commander a little bit more. You obviously don't want to put them down if your opponent has decent ranged options, because they will just laugh at you on the other side of them and shoot you in the face. Yeah, they're just a weird one, aren't they? I think a lot of the things with these narrow terrain pieces is I think people perceive that they're only really valuable if you get that side of the board, whereas all the wider pieces like the Weirwood, the corpse pile, have like a area of effect 6 inches around them, and the bog is just a bigger bit of terrain which impedes more movement. These narrow ones generally only actually impact you if you end up like, again, if you knew what side of the board you were going to be on when you were deploying them, you'd probably see these sorts of things more. But I think it just comes down to the fact that they're only perceived to be useful if they're near you. Mm-hmm. Generally speaking, would be my. I mean, obviously, I'm not speaking for every player, but that's just my thoughts of playing all this time.
I can see that, yeah. To comment against people in chat, NatLab said a shift is not a move and not an action. A shift is not an action, that is true. A shift is a move. Realigning in combat, which is defined not as a shift, but it calls it shift in combat when you realign. S with a little s, not S with a capital S. Shifting in combat is not shifting. Shifting is movement. So,
well, not according to Chanel, right? Shifting in combat isn't move. I don't want to get into that.
Shifting with a little s, shifting as in like in a placement, is not movement. But shifting with a big S that you do as a result of like a card or something like that is a thing that is movement. They are different things because...
When is moving not moving? When you don't capitalise the S.
It is stupid. You know what, it doesn't even capitalise the S in all cases as well. But knowing the difference,
I don't get it. I don't get it. Let me read it. When a unit performs actions in this terrain piece, suffer D3+1 wounds.
Actions are shifts aren't actions.
Yeah. So what you're saying? So if you're shooting, like Dave Toon's talking about, you're doing a shoot action, so you would take the damage. Same, you would take the damage even if you didn't move. Yes. But if you were shifting off of an effect like Lord Varys's effect, if your opponent takes the horse, that wouldn't count.
Yeah.
For example.
But the second half, units moving into this terrain piece suffer D3+1 wounds. Shifting is considered a move in all game aspects, except when you're realigning.
Oh, don't get into it, mate.
Yeah, which realigning isn't shifting, even though it says the word shift in realigning. I think it shouldn't be called a shift. It should be called realign. I hate.
Did you remove these cookies from the cookie jar? No, I shifted them in combat. I've realigned them in combat, so it's not actually a move.
My hand was in combat with the cookies, and then I shifted them out of there. So yeah.
Yeah. I don't get it, but yeah.
Happy to discuss that later on. Go on.
They're very good, but you just don't see them generally.
Yeah. I think going through other factions and stuff, I do think Starks kind of aren't worried about them. Obviously, Lannisters don't mind them. Starks maybe don't like them, but aren't too worried about them either. I think they're a weird one. You can kind of semi-use them to set your own berserkers off. That's not a terrible idea, even though it seems stupid, but they don't offer any other negatives. That's actually a big buff in that you still got your rerolls and everything else. That's actually quite huge. So you're willing... Yeah?
Are they good turbo ramps for giants? See, like, can you actually do some wounds once you go into combat?
I tried to justify turbo ramps for giants. The problem is, if you're taking D3+1 wounds before you charge...
Yeah, you're probably in trouble.
You're probably really not in a good spot. And this is the thing, that giants taking 2 wounds from an attack, while not likely, the kind of units that they're facing can do 2 wounds. You know, that's only 4 hits. Through a 4+ armor save. People have either got rerolls and Sundering and Vulnerable, or precision.
You know what stakes are good for? Is if you're busting out that sick taunt ability.
Oh yeah, that sick taunt ability. Anyway, let's not talk about taunt. Oh man, I hate taunt. Night's Watch are going to use stakes though, because you just never know when you need to sacrifice your own unit to generate Now His Watch Has Ended play, just so you can shoot more stuff. I hate Night's Watch. Free folk, no, you might use giants and stakes. The thing, you might do it, but really it's not great. You're not going to use stakes though, probably, for free folk.
They're used for impeding movement, and you don't really want that with
free folk.
Free folk, yeah. You ignore them with Igrit, right?
No, not dangerous.
You don't ignore dangerous. Okay.
I don't think Baratheons want to use them. Really?
No.
Maybe. I think Davos Commander, like you were saying before, with like the 2 stakes around an objective, like on the flank, to outflank and then just control it straight away and not have to worry about it because you've got Pathfinder. Maybe if you're running like Renly and you're running the The Thornwatch, not Thornwatch captains, the
Yeah, I know the one you mean. The one that ignores all the rules,
Thornwatch Sentinel. Yeah.
all the train rules. Yeah.
The problem is that you're playing in a point for attachments now, which Baratheons don't have the space for. And what you're doing it with wardens. Yes. Maybe that's a.
They're,
Maybe
they're
that's
in.
it.
They're interesting. It's like I'm watching a lot of chess recently. These are more like opening gambits. I
Yes.
feel like they're there to block people for a turn, to slow them down. So you block the swords on the tactics board early, so they can't destroy it round one, and then they have to waste the an activation or something. So they're useful if your opponent is low activation and can't clear them without wasting like a fifth of their on-field activations or something like that. But they're more opening gambits than they are long-term plays generally from how I see them used. I don't see them used. People don't use them in mine for like mid and long game. They use them for like opening gambits generally.
Yes. Yeah, I would tend to agree.
Same with all these like Palisade as well, really. Because unless you're doing the whole abusing the charge thing, which people generally don't do, it's kind of like awful. It's kind of frowned upon.
I know, right? But that doesn't stop us doing it. Hey. Fred.
Yeah, I'd use it against you standard, but
Oh yeah, classic. Fred has the best comment of today. The North remembers is too powerful, so let's give it to Night's Watch. Yep, sounds about right.
It's almost better, isn't it, though? Because you can trigger 2, because that happened to me recently.
Yeah.
Still 1 standard. But it's just fucking stupid, isn't it? I mean, the whole faction is dumb.
But yeah, I mean, stakes. I think Targs actually don't really want to use them, even though they do have workarounds. But like, I don't think they also care at the same time. Weird, as I say, I think it's a tech piece for Targs again. And Greyjoy's similar kind of thing. I think stakes really are a tech piece for a lot of these factions, but certain factions really don't want to see them. Certain factions do. I'm now thinking a lot in my head that I'm going to run more stakes with Starks and Baratheons, and run a real meme list of Renly side Baratheon stuff, with maybe thinking Courtney or something. And just run a real meme Baratheon list that's designed around just stakes don't give a fuck. So.
Well, let me know how you get on with that. Seems interesting.
Oh, it's terrible. It's probably terrible. I might have fun. We'll see. All right then. Moving on. The Wall.
No, it's not the wall. A wall.
No, the Wall. A wall. Not quite the same. For those of you who don't know, because you may have never seen this terrain piece before, it's destructible. It removes rerolls and when charging across, and fortified the +1 defense. I actually think this is one of the best terrain pieces in the game.
Again, if you could guarantee what side of the board you're on.
Yes.
Because it's almost the worst one to have in the wrong place.
Yeah.
So it's a huge risk putting it down.
Yeah.
Because it will basically like completely neuter a charge. +1 armor and no rerolls is like murder. So like again, if you could guarantee that it was on your side of the board, I think you'd see it a lot for defensive shooter units. But it's just such a pain in the arse that people don't generally risk it.
I have to admit I like these placed, and I really like them being in play. There are so many reasons I like these, specifically though, because I don't think I care too much about the guarantee. If you place them well, and place them so that they're not actually aggressive necessarily, but use them kind of like semi-defensively, then you play around them being a roadblock for you or your opponent. Look for a middle ground play, look for a mid-placement play, but then play in a manner that's going to use that wall to an advantage. Maybe with the intention of not playing it. I mean, specifically walls, I don't like to drop them as my first terrain drop, especially if I'm going first. Don't want to place a wall on the board. It's too committal. But if I'm going second and placing the last piece of terrain on the board, I love a tech wall into some random place on the board that's like my opponent just goes, "What the fuck?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm gonna use that wall. Don't know how yet." Um, I really like that.
I would say that if you are, first of all, I'll just caveat they're great for dragons. If you're taking dragons, take them because they
Yep,
ignore them all, and you can just hide a dragon behind it, and you get 3-up save and no rerolls, and you just laugh.
as per.
So yeah. So standard, they're good for dragons. But I feel that this piece of terrain, if it's in the middle of the board, is a massive momentum robber.
Yes.
So if you're doing well, it can massively rob momentum from you pushing forward and closing the game up before your opponent sorts his life out, sorts his battle line, busts out Tycho, heals up, God knows what else they can do. And it all comes down to, are you preparing for defeat or are you preparing to win? And if you put one of these in the middle of the board, you're saying, well, actually, this will rob my opponent of momentum for winning the game. It's like that. It's like that Baratheon Master Warden, which robs all the re-rolls and the flank charge and stuff like that. He's effectively a point insurance if things aren't going well for you, and it's like with him, and you spend that point somewhere else. Well, you could pick another faction. That would be the best way. But if you're using Baratheons, could you use that Master Warden point to put you in a better position that you don't need the Master Warden? And I kind of feel the same with walls. Like, if you've got the wall in the middle and it's there to rob momentum from whoever's winning, you're basically saying, well, I'm not going to be winning. Which might be the case. But like, if you're playing, like, I suppose if we're talking about each bloody piece of terrain for God knows how many hours now of each faction, we're probably thinking about how trying to win. And that would just be that would be my thing, that they're just momentum robbers. Personally, I just feel like it can blunt momentum, which is good if you're losing. But if you're losing and you put it down, you're planning to lose, and I don't know. I just feel like that's my thoughts on it. I'm sure there is something super interesting that you can do, like you were saying about on the flank and all that, but that's just my gut reaction. But it's one of the most. It's just like the super bastard terrain piece, isn't it? Because it's got all the best rules in one thing. I mean, it's destructible, which isn't good, I suppose, depending how you look at it. But yeah, it's the charge blunter massively.
I agree there, massively. I agree. So running through the factions very quickly, summarizing that, I think neutrals actually quite like it. I think neutrals like it. I think Lannisters can quite like it as well, and I think Baratheons actually can really like it. If you can leverage it and get yourself into a winning position, I think this is a key terrain piece. And if you have a plan in round 1 and round 2, where it doesn't really matter what your opponent does, you're able to get some key winning pieces into position, then I feel that this terrain piece for those 3 factions, especially because they're so defensive, is very, very strong. So,
I mean, of course, if you're playing Fire and Blood, it changes things up again, right? Like,
completely.
if there's, like if you can hold back and that sort of stuff. But yeah, I mean, not to say I'm the best player in the world or anything, but that's just how I would look at it.
Yeah, I
I'm
would
sure
tend to agree
Larks
as
will
well.
come on and tell me I'm a twat or Bolton Skincare.
They just come on
But
and tell you you're a twat anyway, regardless of your opinion.
yes, yeah, I could have said the complete opposite.
Yeah, I don't think Starks like to see walls, unfortunately. Carl's right. It's another piece that solos really like to see, but I don't like to see this particular piece for a Stark player. I want to be charging and not giving +1 armor to my opponent. That's dumb.
Starks are already the faction of all bark, no bite, I think, and this just fucking pulls their teeth out.
Yeah. Night's Watch. Well, if you're playing Offal, you get 2 of these on tactics cards. So I mean,
No, fucking awful.
Quick reminder. Yes, that's a tactics card. Place this.
And you know what we were saying about they'd be used all the time if you could pick where they are and like good to deploy behind. Yeah. Well, that's another reason he's ridiculous. Dragons obviously love him, as we talked about.
Yeah.
I
think free folk don't hate them. I think free folk want them in some scenarios where they want to make a raider unit just annoyingly difficult to remove, or a Fen unit actually tanky, or they want to make a unit a bit frustrating, but you have to know where you're using them in Free Folk. They're going to be going on the side where your raiders are. You don't want them anywhere near your spearwives, because then your spearwives aren't killing stuff. But
Yeah,
if you stick them
what
over
they
that flank.
what they can be good at for free folk is that it means your 4-point unit should be able to hold up like a 6 or 7-point unit for longer, because that first charge won't be as devastating.
Yeah.
And then, the longer they're holding that unit up, the rest of your army should be able to beat ideally beat the rest of everything that's going on, and then deal with that. The raiders will be dead by the end of it,
Oh
but
yeah.
it's just how long it takes whatever they're fighting to get through them.
Yeah. Similarly with Greyjoys,
yeah.
right? Exactly the same argument with Greyjoys, pretty much. Like this unit, this with a unit of trappers is just mainly annoying.
Yeah, that's true. I suppose I'd still go with Corpse Piles, I think. I would lean towards Bowman over Trappers personally, but
Yeah.
I've not actually played a game of Greyjoys. I've played against them a couple of times. I've got all the stuff sitting somewhere, but just haven't touched them.
Well, I think that covers walls there. The only other faction we've not talked about is Targaryen. Like we said, dragons love them. Pikemen love them. Like pikemen saving on 3s, and you lose your rerolls, and they get to do all the things. Yeah, that's pretty.
That's one of those things again, isn't it? Where like if your opponent has to charge that unit at that point, they've lost the game.
Yeah.
Like it's one of those things that will work out for them 2 in 10 times, and that's not a risk you take if you're winning or the game is average, like going averagely. It's only something like
with a movement 5 defensive unit like pikemen as well. Like the movement 5 is just like icing on the cake, because they're probably going to get there before another type of defensive unit is.
Yeah.
That's actually why Lannister halberdiers get played, I think. Even I don't think they're amazing, but the movement 5 on them is just really useful.
I quite like them. I think they're a good mix of. They obviously lean towards being a bit more defensive than offensive, but yeah, I think they're good. I think they're all right.
Yeah.
They're not red cloaks. I suppose is the problem, but.
All right then, and we move on to this terrain piece. Do you know what this terrain piece is?
Oh.
Can you name it?
No. What is it?
There's one. You often see these in bases of 12 wounds, but there's 4 of them on a base. And it's the second name that they have is synonymous with the dark time at the end of the day.
Tourney ground on a Monday.
Oh, there you go. Yes, this is Tourney ground.
It's the hedge. You know what? I'm actually looking up what they do. I don't remember.
-1 move and
rough. They got cover.
And cover. Yeah, that's it.
Fucking hell, how big is this hedge? The hedge is bigger than a wall.
As big as a dragon.
It's as big as a tree. Yeah, these are shit.
Oh, Fred says it really well. They're 2 inches too short, is what that is.
Yeah, if they covered a tray. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the thing, right? They are basically exactly the same width as a tray. I think they're ever so slightly wider, but it doesn't matter, because of a range. The only reason a range unit would ever not see you is if it's directly behind the hedge. If it's offset by even like 0.5 millimeter, it's like, oh, I can see around it now. It's like,
yeah, like if you want the cover, like it's basically a smaller bog that can be destroyed.
Yeah.
And the upside of it is you get the cover rule, which for all the reasons we've discussed isn't good. Even solo units will struggle to be fully covered by it. Yeah, you just don't see it, do you? I don't think anyone's ever picked one of these ever.
I use it in certain factions, certain matchups where I don't mind the -1, but I don't want to lose rerolls. I think it actually has quite a lot of value in something like Greyjoy, where perhaps losing the rerolls is something you don't want, because you're not running the 2+ style builds. But the -1 move isn't a big deal, because you've got the ability to ignore it. I don't dislike it with surprise, surprise Targaryen. I don't massively dislike it with something like Stark, where you're rolling auto sixes for charging and things when North Remembers is coming off and things like that, and you've got rerolls from Winter is Coming and Devastating Impact on the horses. Don't massively dislike it for those factions. It's not good though.
Yeah, it's not for me.
I'm
I
I'm
I don't I don't think I ever put one down.
I'm still not picking this. Like there are some factions where this isn't the worst terrain piece, but it's still on like not my top 2 or 3 picks. So just sad. They're not bad. I do think they have value. I just really don't feel there's any faction that wants to pick them. Simple as that.
No, they suck ass. I
Yeah.
wouldn't even go through the list of factions.
No, I'm not going to. No, don't plan to.
I will say on terrain as a whole, though, as someone who likes playing in organised tournament play, one of the biggest issues with tournament play for like nearly every war game is the requirement for terrain at like large scale tournaments. There was the famous 40k tournament at the LGT multiple years before we attended, where it's just a hassle getting all this stuff together, and you often find that you know the density of terrain at a tournament is like a big talking point for like people building lists and how it affects metas and all this sort of stuff. One of the greatest things about this game is you are guaranteed. Well, you could be random terrain where there's 3 or 5 pieces or whatever, but you know before going to the tournament how much terrain there's going to be on the board. You're not going to be surprised by anything. It's all in the rule book, and there's a great, obviously it would look nicer with 3D terrain. I started building some, but I was bored. Obviously, I've got a mind of a magpie, fly all over the place. But yeah, like it's one of the best things about this game, especially from an organized play perspective. It's absolutely amazing. So yeah, like I hope they keep it the same. I don't see why they would change it at this point. But
Aside
yeah,
from
I think it's great.
aside from the whole shifting thing as well, like that's got nothing to do with terrain really. That's just the way that they define everything in that regard. Um, Terrain is easy to use. That's what I like. Is it's very easy, very obvious how it interacts with basically every set of rules. Even though that interaction in the case of the 2 things, the shifting, not great, through dangerous, and palisade blocking feels unnatural, but it is how it interacts. Like they've said that, yeah, that's just how it interacts, and that's not really palisade so much as that's just things that block. Units do the same thing. So yeah, I've got no problem with terrain.
The only rule that really has an issue is the cover rule, because that's the only rule there could ever be any real argument over, like line of sight.
Yeah.
But it's such a better system than any other war game. You could argue it's basic, but yeah, the simplicity,
It is basic, and I would even argue it's because of how basic it is. It's not a very good rule, but it's still it's easy to use, it's easy to understand.
No, I'm talking about terrain in general. Like the cover rule is crap. Like it could be better because it's either not impactful at all or stupid.
It's at least it's usable. Unlike I mean, we've both played 40k type games, right? Where if you get down at eye level and you look from your model's head, like true line of sight, I absolutely despise true line of sight because I feel like true line of sight is did you walk around the board and look at your model's head and then look directly at the unit that you're trying to position and then, go and just twitch so his back leg just isn't sticking out and then you're like, cool, now you can't see me. And it's like
there's loads of problems. I mean, don't get me started. It's what cover does this provide? Is it a 5 or a 6 up or whatever the case is now? Because it's all modifiers, isn't it? Like the rule set, the train rule set is simple. It means there's a uniformed way the game is played, so you can go to any gaming club. If you can find anyone else playing the bloody game. If you go to another gaming club, there's no like how many terrain pieces should we put down. It's in the rule book. It's pretty clear. You have 2 different ways of selecting it, but ultimately it results in a fairly similar outcome either way, between 3 and 5 pieces. The rules are all clearly defined. There's no need to discuss or agree ahead of time what all the terrain pieces do. Yeah, it's just great. It's a great part of the core rules, I think, the way terrain works.
Yeah,
But yeah,
Cool. So that's terrain. Talked enough about terrain, I think now though. So
basically pick whatever you want, don't matter.
pick whatever you want. But I mean,
Yeah,
if we were to order up terrain, most picked we know is quartz piles. Weirwoods is up there, but I think me and Chris we tend to agree. Quartz piles are pretty good, but actually things like bogs, bogs actually really valuable. Look to palisades and walls a lot more as well, for offering you something slightly different. And yeah, I think that was our takeaways there, wasn't it? Really, obviously we don't need to talk about quartz piles and weirwoods and how prominent they are. But look to those other three pieces more commonly. They are better than you probably think, more usable than you think. And certainly, if you feel like every game is two quartz piles and two weirwoods, then me and Chris will probably say that you're playing the game not very well, because you should be looking to pick the other terrain pieces. They'd probably
yeah.
do you better.
It's not 1.6 anymore, man.
No,
Bust out. Well, I was gonna say hedge. Don't get the hedge. Hedge sucks. Get the other stuff.
I can't believe
But yeah,
hedges. I can't believe how bad hedges were bad in 1.6, so they weren't very good. And then they just brought them into 1.7 and went, they are the same thing, but not as good as they were.
I
And
think
they
they
weren't
just
good.
resigned to the fact that ultimately they had to have a second design on the back of one of those cards, and yeah, ultimately, what are you going to do? You can't make the hedge sturdier than the wall or the palisades, can you? And it's not scary like a quartz pile, so you're kind of stuck.
I also really like Carl's thing there. Covey just used to be the unit's line of sight from like the range marker, rather than just anywhere on the tray on the front edge, which I do agree with actually. Um, I do find it really weird that a unit can't shoot a unit if it's only got long range from the corner, but it can shoot the unit if it's long range from the middle, but it can see it regardless. Measure it all from the front point. Way better.
That would help clear it up. That would make cover a lot stronger. But
Way strong. And it would also mean that you like archer units sitting behind palisades couldn't abuse charge blocking as often.
well, yeah, because the arrow would have to be out, which would mean 50% of the unit could be seen.
Yeah. Or you'd be watching out at an angle, so you'd only see a certain part of the field. There you go.
I mean, there are bigger fish to fry. I mean, like, if anyone from CMON is listening, do concentrate on rebalancing Night's Watch over hedges, please.
But also please rebalance hedges.
Hedge is not a priority. I don't care. The hedge is fine.
Hedge #1 priority. Hedge Knight's good. Regular hedge is bad. Yes. Hedge Knights. Was it one of those days, one of those nights, or whatever? Yeah. Anyway, power rankings, we'll be glad to know, are shifting yet again. Night's Watch are currently, I believe, in first. I have to double check. Night's Watch are in first, but Free Folk have been overtaking them. There's been a lot of change here recently. We can speculate on this. We're not going to. We can speculate on this, but I'm going to say it bluntly. People aren't running the good stuff anymore. You know? And you've only got to look at Night's Watch right now, and you can see, look, 2 Offal builds. You look at these Offal builds, and it's things like Offal Veterans, Crossbowmen, Swarm Brothers, Trackers, Conscript 2, and where's the Watch Captains? Where's the other stuff? Like, and that's not to have a go at these people running these stuff. These people run this stuff because they want to, they enjoy it. But this is not the Offal that we see at the top level. It's not the Jon Snow that we see at the top level with like massed rangers and watch captains either. And so they're picking up a lot of losses, and ultimately they're being like Alistair's being picked more, and Alistair's still crap.
It seems to be on a cursory glance, like ELO events seem to be making up like 30-40% of all the events being played at the moment.
Yep.
Which is obviously, I think, it's a good thing. I'm just going through the stats now. I don't think Offal's won a game since like mid-November.
Yes.
I don't think. Yeah, I don't think good players are generally using them. In all honesty, I mean, I know that's very dismissive of anyone who is, but you know,
the traditional builds,
talking broad strokes here, people. Talking broad strokes.
The traditional builds that we're used to seeing of Offal are not being played, which is the thing. All of the Offal builds that you're seeing are shying away from the classic example. I mean, we've got an Othel build here that's double Scorpion, double Conscripts, one Ranger Hunter. It's not a bad build, but it's not the builds we're used to seeing.
And it would still probably be all right against anyone other than a Drogo-led Targaryen list.
Yeah, I mean, this one here with Veterans, Othel, Stone Thrower, Conscript Brothers, Watch Marshal, 2 NCU, probably not great.
Yeah, and again, this isn't knocking people for like trying different things. Yeah, like I think it's just the reality of it.
Well, what's interesting is we're seeing these builds, but we're not seeing the powerful ones. It's the fact that we aren't seeing the powerful ones at all, because I think people have kind of resided them and said, "Oh no, I don't want to touch that stuff anymore." Duggan seems less asked with games right now. I'm not going to force him. Fair, Tom. Not playing games. That's fair. But yeah, it's a shame. It's a real shame, because I think Night's Watch, it feels a little bit disingenuous to tell people that not Free Folk are as good as Night's Watch. I've said on here multiple times, I think Free Folk are. You've got to be careful when balancing this December patch. Has to be very careful, because if they nerf Night's Watch in the way that we think they're going to, then Targaryen go under the radar. Targaryen will be very strong. And Free Folk, if they get buffs to much stuff, they're going to be very strong as well.
Yeah, I mean,
worried about that quite a lot.
I want them to concentrate on the top offenders, the worst offenders, and leave everything else and see how the lay of the land goes.
Yeah. Maybe the odd buff to something that is truly terrible is fine.
Ideal solution is nerf the top 15 to 20% a bit and boost the bottom 10%, 5 to 10%.
Yeah.
Like the real directs that fucking is utter crap, like Lannister crossbowmen. You know, I wouldn't even go necessarily as far as Mountains Men. I know they're not good, but they're not as bad as Lannister crossbowmen. Like the real direct stuff, which people just do not use at all. Because you don't want to rock the boat too much, because ultimately rocking the boat too much is how we got to 2021 in the first place.
Yep.
Because they just threw the baby out with the bathwater on a lot of stuff. So for me, shave the top 15 to 20%, sort it out. And to be honest, Night's Watch should probably get, 60% of all changes. I would say. But yeah.
Cool. I want to quickly go through events. I assume the ELO format in Duke's Gaming went ahead. I assume. So Kieran's got to put the results on, I think. I don't know if they play the games live or they're going to put those results on later on. I'll have to talk with Kieran about that. But we had also finished this weekend. I think we had. Let's have a look at the Hall of Champions. We had 2 French events. Was last week? No, it was this week. That was the one from last week. This is the one from this week. Nation Gaming Home, which Decipher won with his Free Folk. He ran a Mance list and a Tormund list, so I'll be posting those up on Free Folk to talk about. But they're pretty classic Free Folk Mance list, running 5 activation on field, 3 NCU. And the Tormund list is a 5 activation with Mag solo, which again is becoming quite popular with Tormund.
Mag or...
Yeah, Mag. Not 1/1, but Mag.
Oh, okay.
Your auto wounds, man. Basically, well, no armor save hits. Not the same thing, but strong. It's strong.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, that was Decipher in France. So well done to him. Coming up, we've got an event in Helsinki this weekend. Finish event. You are running quite a few events, so congrats to them ahead of time. But hopefully that goes really well. Another one in Valencia in Spain. One in Element Games in Manchester, where Carlo's going to be present at Rimble Rumble. I always say that badly. It's Ribble Rumble, not Rimble Rumble. Jesus. And another one in Bergheim in Germany. And another event in Liverpool, although I don't know how many players are attending that one, because a lot of the ones attending Ribble Rumble will probably not be attending the Just Play event. It's on the same day. And on the Sunday, we've got the War of the Nine Penny Kings in Russia, and the Battle of White Harbour in Rotterdam. And we've also got a Honey Badger inaugural A Song of Ice and Fire tournament happening in Sacramento, California, starting this weekend. So loads of stuff. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 events happening this weekend. Coming up.
I think that's really strong for December.
Yeah.
If this, if you just see the uptake you would expect to see once Christmas period's over, that's pretty healthy, I would say.
I'd say it's a pretty good thing, right? It's pretty good. It's healthy. It's good.
I'm really looking forward to Always Winter.
Yeah.
I hope the updates drop before then. We will have to see.
So, if you are wondering about Always Winter, the Scottish event happening in January, you can actually still sign up. They've got no tickets left. Obviously, they filled out the ticket sales, but you can sign up to join the waiting list. I would advise, if you're interested in going and you haven't bought a ticket, do sign up to the waiting list, because I can tell you for a fact that some players will drop out. Having run events in the past, be it TTS or physical, myself and Chris can tell you, people drop out. Just what people do.
There'll always be dropouts. I can't speak to how long the waiting list is, but I think it'd be good. Come down if you are available.
Definitely do so. So we've gone over the 2-hour mark in a discussion on terrain that I definitely made last longer than it should have really been made. But no, enjoyable as always. Chris, thank you very much for joining me this week. Remember the GT, the London GT, not this time, but this time minus 2 months. In next year, sign up is not yet open, but you can definitely register interest, join the Discord, start talking about the GT, getting your travel plans sorted ASAP. So when tickets go live, you can snap one up nice and quickly at the cheaper cost of what the ticket sales will be.
I guess it's a good reminder as well about the Song of Ice and Fire Stats Invitational. So if you are going to any big events anywhere in the world, or if you're playing in a big TTS event, do get in touch. If you're organising it, you can get in touch ahead of time, and possibly we'll be able to offer an invitational spot to you. The invitational will be happening in the UK, so obviously we understand that we're not unrealistic. We don't expect we're going to have people flying in from all over the world like Street Fighter 2 character select screen or anything, but it'll be good. Hopefully we'll have some people from off these shores attending. But yeah, it would just be a good time for the community. Hopefully something for the community to get amped and hyped about. I think it was quite nice to see, from an organizer perspective, how excited people globally seem to be about the LGC and like following the results and stuff like that. That was really nice to see. So yeah, and I'm the same. If there's any big events going on, a Song of Ice and Fire Stats, I will peek my head in and have a nosy. But I think it'd be cool. So do if you are running any big events or playing in any big events or do well or win any big events, let me or Carlo know on Discord. I'm Leet Teddy. He's for Carlo Z or whatever it is.
Z for Carlo, yeah.
Oh fuck, whatever. He'll be the twat putting his nose in someone else's business, telling them why poor fellows are good, probably, and why you should bring 3 NCUs. But I think that's it. Come to the events; it'll be good. Sign up to more events. Start events in the south of the UK so I can go to them. Yep. Safe.
Fantastic. Right, guys. Well, we'll see you this time next week for the next episode of Tourney Ground. But all the people playing in events, all the event games you may be playing over the next coming week, I really hope they go fantastically well for you. I hope you go and get as many wins as you can, and I really hope you go and smash some ELO and get some juicy points. Guys, enjoy the weekend. Enjoy and have a fantastic week. See you next week.
Safe.
Ready, aim, release! Anyone see my mammoth?